1. Hey, welcome everyone to another Boston Speaks episode. We are on episode 37 with Ed Everts. Raise your visibility and value. So if you don't know who Ed Everts is, he is a leadership coach and author who helps successful leaders raise their visibility and value in their organization and industry. And he just came out with the book. And you want to show them? It's a nice cover.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Ed,
professionally designed.
Yes. For my audience that do not know who you are, do you want to tell them a little bit more about what you do and get a little bit more in depth? Because I like to go into why you do what you do.
Sure. And I think a big reason why I do what I do is my background. So I spent 25 years in, what I call corporate America, which was working for large organizations, some of them based in New England, most of them based in New England. So I worked for a number of retailers. I helped kill some of your favorite department stores, Lechmere, Jordan Marsh, and Filene's. And I worked there for about 20 years. And then I spent the last 10 years of my career working for a company called Iron Mountain, which is also based here in the Boston area. Mm-hmm. So I left Iron Mountain in 2008 due to a job reduction and made a decision to start my own practice in 2008. And it was really in those corporate experiences that I first started to observe these trends and behaviors around visibility and value. And I always remember, one of my first experiences with visibility was at Iron Mountain, where early on in 2008 or 2009, when the company was smaller, I could get on the elevator every morning and be, hey, Kit, hi, Mary, hi, Brooke, hi, Ed, right? And I knew everybody and, we could catch up, et cetera. And in 2008, when I got on the elevator, I knew no one. I didn't know who they were. I didn't know what they did. I had no idea. And I'm like, how does this happen? I know obviously organizations get bigger. Yeah. We were still in the same building, still the same elevator, and yet the difference just grew significantly. And that's what really started me thinking about this world of visibility. And I also tell a quick story in my book about how my former boss who hired me left, and she moved on to another opportunity. And a new boss came in, and one of the first things she said to me was, I don't hear a lot about Ed Everts at this company. Yeah. And she doesn't know this at this time, and we're very good colleagues, but, I was devastated because I thought I was Mr. Popular, right? I thought everybody knew me and that I did lots of work that was valuable. And that's what really started me recognizing the relationship between visibility and value, that you have to be seen, and I don't just mean physically, but in a lot of different ways, and you have to be add value with the stuff that you're being seen with.
That's a great story. So do you think a lot of people are having this issue in the workplace?
Yeah. So I wish I had a nickel for every client who on their own, without prompting from me, talks a little bit about being more visible. They always start with visibility. And, even though we live in these highly technological environments where there's, like here, glass walls and, email and Facebook and LinkedIn, and companies have their own LinkedIn, their own like internal LinkedIn, et cetera. People are still not feeling visible, and they want not to just be more visible, but they want to be more visible with certain people. So, folks are generally fairly well known with their work group, the folks that they work with every day, et cetera. Right. But once they break those work groups, they're just not as well known. And so it might also be with key stakeholders in the organization, up into the senior vice presidents and president, could be board of directors. There's other groups that folks want to be more visible with, that they just don't see themselves showing the amount of visibility that they want to. And I just have a personal belief that if you're not visible, people also don't know what value you provide because they don't see you, don't think about you. Yeah. And so with greater visibility, people increase their likelihood for new opportunities, for growth and development, and ensuring that they're continuing to grow in the organization.
So just to get into it, now if I'm someone who is, let's say I do a lot of work, but I don't feel valued or I feel seen, how do you help people? Earlier we said, can we use the whiteboard so you feel inspired to? Let's get into it really. If there was
sure.
What's your process? What's the process?
Well,
I know it's a big thing.
Well, it's a big thing, and you can always, buy the book to get more ideas on value. And so two-thirds of the book is on visibility, because I think it starts with visibility and being more visible, and then you also have to ensure that you're adding value. And I tell everyone that the first thing they should do is find some time to sit with your boss And in some organizations, believe it or not, that's hard. Bosses don't always have enough time even for their own employees. I worked with a client at a company, a pharmaceutical company, very large, very big here in the Boston area. And he would get 30 minutes a month with his boss. And I was like, really? 30 minutes? That's it? And he's like, that's it. And sometimes it got rescheduled. And so a month could go by where he never had one-on-one time with his boss. So I recognize for some folks, even scheduling time or finding time to be with your boss one-on-one and not talk about projects and agendas and issues can be really, really hard. So the first step is to find time to do that. And it could be at lunch, it could be at breakfast. Don't add stuff to your workday. These are things that happen anyway. And say, hey, we're really busy. Why don't we grab lunch today? And there's a couple of things I'd love to talk to you about. But the first thing you need to work on is identifying with your boss your desire to add more value to the organization. Now, this is not a conversation going on in corporations around the globe. And
that's very impactful.
Yeah, and it's one of my personal missions to make it a conversation that's going on in the globe, that folks are finding ways and conversationally to identify how they can provide more value in their organizations. Now, most bosses may not handle the conversation well because they're not thinking about it, right? So this is a new conversation. I'm coming in and I'm asking you a question that you may not have ever thought about or don't have the answer to. And I know this going in, right? I don't expect you to sit there and say, oh, here are 3 things that you could do. I might be like, gee, I don't know. I have to think about it. And that's okay. Say, look, I've had more time to think about this than you have. So why don't you think about it a little bit and let's get together in a couple of weeks and let's have a conversation about it. I would hope most bosses would be excited to have people thinking about how they can add more value to the organization. Now, of course, it depends on organization size. So the bigger you are, the less likely that might be something that's of interest to the boss. I did a workshop on Friday for a financial services firm in Woburn, and we had 25 sales and account management people in the room, and everybody talked about what they could do to add more value to the organization. And the 3 partners who own the firm were there. And they were like in love, right, with this topic, right? Of course. They loved that everybody was talking about how can we provide more value to this organization. It's a smaller entity, so the impact is a little bit more realistic and doable than a really, really, really big company. But anyway, to simply answer your question, the first thing people need to do is find time to schedule time with your boss to talk specifically about how you could add more value, not about projects and initiatives and
adding more value.
Yeah, it's how can I add more value?
Well, let me ask you this: if someone is shy, what's the best way for them to approach it? If they don't want to go, oh, boss, I want to talk to you to add more value.
Well, in the book, I talk about really 3 ways. And look, a lot of the reasons that this may not be something people talk about is because they have a preference for introversion, and it's hard for them to get up and beat their chest and toot their horn and talk about these things. Most folks with a preference for introversion aren't introverted if they've had time to think about it, right? So introverts think first and talk second, and so they'll typically be a little quieter at a meeting. And but once you get them going or talk with them the next day or the day after, the ideas start coming like crazy, right? So in the book, I talk about really 3 steps of having a conversation with your boss: the pre-step, the actual conversation, and then the post-step, right? Because this isn't like a hit and run where I run in for 2 seconds and have this conversation. And in the pre-step, there's a couple of other things that you can do. One is take projects that you're currently working on, and in the book, as well as on my website, there's a form you could fill out that's a value identifier where you can list projects and see if you can articulate the ways that it's adding value to your organization. You could do that work, send it to the boss in advance, say, hey, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about how I can add value with the organization. Here's a form I filled out on 2 or 3. It's not everything, because the boss isn't going to have time to look at everything, but 2 or 3 ways that I'm currently adding value. And I'd love to have this conversation with you. Most folks with a preference for introversion, if they set up the conversation, are more likely to have a great conversation. And plus, they're talking about something that's very important to themselves, which is themselves, right? So they're not talking about you or the organization. They're not in front of 75 people talking. They're having a one-on-one conversation about themselves with their boss. And if you set it up and then conduct the conversation well, and then do follow-up work, which includes sending a thank you note, as well as a recap. So recaps are really important because bosses have a lot going on, and they may not remember everything that they committed to or said they could do or would want to do. So you want to send a recap saying, hey, here's what I heard today. Thank you for your time. Here's what I heard today. I want to make sure we're in agreement, moving forward, et cetera. So I believe, and I'm not a person who is shy, so I can only speak from observation that, with those steps, a person is equally likely to have great progress as somebody who, can talk a mile a minute.
Wow. Yeah. And I think it's just comforting for people to hear you say that too, because it's something that is much needed that's out there.
Yeah, a lot of people, they don't realize it, especially the clients that I work with. A lot of them have really moved into the passenger seat of their career. And so they're in a job, it's very, very busy, right? So saying things are busy is the new answer of the new millennium, right? You ask anybody how it's going, and the answer is it's busy. So, it's hard to find time to think about yourself and to focus on yourself in very, very active and fast changing and fast paced environments, right? Because time will go by and months will go by, right? If I hear one more time, I can't believe it's December already. That's how fast time flies, right? It's just boom, boom, boom. Next thing you know, it's 2018 and you're like, gee, where did the year go? And how did I let another year go by, et cetera? So you have to find time to move from the passenger seat to the driver's seat of your career. And if you want to look for ways to add more value, one of the best ways to do it is to have this conversation with your boss.
What about the other side? The boss.
In what way?
Taking initiative.
Yeah, well, even in a more perfect world, which, and I know they're out there are bosses who might be saying, gee, I'd love my employees to be providing more value, or at least be able to articulate, what value does our group, our work group, our team provide this organization? And, different organizations and different functional areas provide different types of value. So a boss could pull people together and do the same conversation, but just reverse it and say, hey guys, I want to talk a little bit more about the value we provide, not performance, not how you did, and not MBOs and not goals, but let's talk about the value that we can, beat our chest and talk about as an organization and to the organization, and let's start working on that. And I think this is a multi-step conversation. This is not something you just do once and say, hey, great job, but you might have questions. People might need to think, right? If there are folks with a preference for introversion in that group, they will need some time. They're just not going to, off the top of their head, start spitting stuff out, because by preference, introversions are more likely to think first and then speak second. And so they need a little bit of time to do that.
So if there's one thing that you can give the audience, I know everyone is at a different stage.
Sure.
If you were to give them one thing to do to help them raise the value and the visibility, what do you think that one thing would be?
So I think it's the one thing that I've already said. So all of you out there in 2018, schedule some time with your boss to talk about the value that you either do or can provide your organization.
Yeah.
It's different for everyone. So, functionally, whether you're a law firm or a technology firm or a pharmaceutical firm or a retailer, the ways that you can provide value are endless. And in fact, in my book, I kind of avoid defining value because the definitions are endless. If you put 10 people in a room and ask them, how to define value, you'll get 10 different answers. I do have a chart that shows, what I consider to be 3 broad areas of value that exist within organizations. The lowest level is individual value, which is what everyone can provide. So everybody provides some degree of individual value in their organizations, or they should be able to describe it, right? If you sit back and try to think about value that you provide your organization and you can't think of anything, then you need to get with a friend and say, I need to really have some good thinking here because I can't think of anything I'm doing, which I would find very hard to imagine. Everybody provides some type of value to an organization. If you were to go to a company president and say, hey, who is your most valuable person? I would guarantee you more often than not, they would say their executive assistant. Because this is the person who schedules my day, manages my account. Answers the phone, right? They keep me able to keep going day in and day out. Now, is that the most valuable person at the corporation? Probably not. But what she's doing is individual value, right? She's doing stuff on her own to provide you value. The second level is financial metric value. So this is values based on the financial metrics. And this is very different from company to company. So a call center and a retailer and a pharmaceutical company are going to have very different financial metrics that they measure. I should know those, right? So everybody in the organization should know when the president of the company gets on the call with the board of directors or Wall Street, what financial metrics are they talking about to describe how well things are going? And can I connect myself to those financial metrics somehow, right? So the line of sight might be really wide and very hard for me to impact it. And other times it can be tighter. But unless I know, and unless I'm asking this question, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And then the third level, the top level, are business drivers based on external marketplace metrics. So the second one was internal financial metrics. And I do believe value is tied to financial metrics. The third is external. And so this is harder for most people, but these are things like, paper prices, vendor materials, things externally that you can or cannot control, but you need to know about, because if your company relies greatly on paper and paper pricing is going up, you need to know that so that you might go to a different vendor or might looking at different technology. Yeah. Right? You might say, hey guys, paper price continues to go up. I think we should start looking at more virtual operations, because what we're doing paper-wise, just we can't keep doing, right? But whatever it might be, that's the top level. So there's really 3 levels of value that folks can identify. Again, in the book, I don't define value, but I do believe that for purposes of raising your visibility and value, that value is tied to financial metrics.
I love how you describe those different kind of values. What about for visibility?
Where would you like me to start?
and in a broad range, if I say, let me get this too. They both have to be balanced, right? So they help one another.
They help one another. I don't, I'm not a sociologist, so I haven't done any studies to see, is it a 50-50 split? Is it 75? I'm not sure. I do believe there are things people can do and need to do on a recurring basis to stay visible. And I think there are things that people need to do in order to contribute value. So they work together. Yes. But I don't know,
This is interesting. I was just thinking, if I'm seen more, do I be seen as more valuable? And if I'm more valuable, am I more visible?
Right. Yeah. Right. You don't want to be the person who everybody knows, but nobody knows what you do. We've all met those people, right? Oh, she's great, but I don't know what she does here. I've heard people say that about colleagues, and I've heard people say that about their boss, that, she seems like a nice person, but I do this, Bob does this, Mary does this. I don't know what's left for her. And so there's a lack of clarity around the value that different people provide organizations. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. What are some questions that most people ask you when you work with clients? Are there certain types of things that come over and over again?
Yeah, well, most people start with visibility, because I think that's a little bit more tangible. And, people just want to, kind of start there. And so in the book, I talk about 7 visibility accelerators. So again, this is from personal experience in my career in retailing and then business to business services. And then also the feedback that I've had for clients for 10 years about things they could do differently in order to be more successful. Can I give you a couple of examples?
Yeah. So I love it.
Yeah. So the first one is just to be, is to introduce yourself. So for whatever reason in the development of our culture, we continue to get worse at introducing ourselves to people than better. And, in the book, I had this joke about, in the caveman days, it was grunting. And then around the 1900s, it was very formal. And, everybody went out of the house looking like they're going to church every day. And now today, it's almost like back to grunting. It's like, hey, hi. Right? So something happened, I don't know when, that, we have lost the art of introducing ourselves. I give other examples, and these are real life examples, and I'm sure you've experienced them, and I'm sure a lot of people listening have, where you go to a training class and 2 things happen. One, everyone sits in the back. So there's just like fear of getting called on, and you're afraid that if you're up closer, you're more likely to get called on than not. And real sophisticated trainers make the back tables come to the front table, right? And they switch them around and throw them off. But, people love to sit in the back. And then secondly, when people sit at your table, they don't introduce themselves. They come in and they go into what I call private zone, which is they take out their iPod or their iPad and they start doing email, and they don't say hi to people, etc. And to me, if I was going to a networking event, or if I was paying for someone who worked for me to go to a networking event and they were not introducing themselves and getting to know everyone they could, I'd have a problem with that. I would say, why are you going if you're just going to go sit in solo land? So, introducing yourself is a really important step that I believe most people could get more effective at. And the number one solution to that is something that's called presence, which is just to take a minute to recognize I'm about to go into a meeting. It could be a meeting like this in a room with just people you don't know everyone. Maybe you know most, but there might be one or two people you haven't met. It could be a huge training class, right, where there's thousands of people, etc. Yeah. But hey, I'm going in. I need to ensure that I introduce myself to everybody that I can. And I'm not suggesting that by introducing yourself, these are going to become relationships, but you're going to know more people. Mm-hmm. And somebody might say one thing or say something that could really, really help you. So another visibility accelerator is engaging with industry associations. So again, another kind of, in my mind, lost art of staying connected when you're working. So people who are working are way less likely to participate in industry organizations than people who are in transition. And it happens like flicking a switch. You're working, your head's down, you're bleeding blue for the company, you've got projects and initiatives and goals and all these things that you're working. You don't believe you have time to participate in anything outside of work. In fact, you're barely getting out of the office on time. Your spouse is angry because you're getting home late, et cetera, right? So you just do not believe you have any of that time. And then the company realigns or your job gets eliminated, whatever. Now you're not working. And what's the first thing you do? You start trying to figure out where to go and who to talk to, et cetera. So you're starting from scratch. You're literally starting from scratch. That's what I found when I left Iron Mountain. 10 years at Iron Mountain, and this is also a true story. 10 years at Iron Mountain, I was in HR. In fact, my whole career, I was in HR. And, 20 years of it in New England. And we all know New England is a pretty tight market. So in my last couple of months at Iron Mountain in 2008, I heard about this organization called the Senior Human Resource Networking Group that, met people at a certain level, and you went and you networked. And I walked into the room for the first meeting in May of 2008. And there were 25 other senior HR leaders from the New England market. And guess how many people I knew?
10.
No. Zero. And I'm not kidding. I did not know one of them. And I remember going home to my wife saying, I am in big trouble because I don't even know any of these people to even start working with them, et cetera. So shame on me, right? I mean, I was not a member of any of the organizations that focused on human resources or leadership development. And I was starting from scratch. And that is a bad place to be, to start from scratch at the time you need it the most. What you want to do is, while you're working, recognize that work today is not lifetime at organizations, but is very transitory. And, Fast Company says most people are going to be employed today at a certain role, a certain company, 4 to 5 years. And that's it. Is when you need to move, whether it's because you want to move or the company wants you to move, you're stepping out and you already know tons of people in your market and you already know how to connect with them. And you do this really by raising your visibility. So you find 2 or 3 organizations that you can participate in. You don't go every day or every week, but, once a quarter, just to stay fresh with them, et cetera. So that's another way that you can raise your visibility, which is staying connected to your industry. And there's also lots of great reasons to belong to an organization outside of work beyond just looking for a job, because a lot of people don't do it because their boss is going to say, why are you a member of that group? Are you looking for work? I've heard people say that as well. It's a great way to meet other people for openings you might have at your company. You can learn best practices, the things that other companies are doing that you guys want to do. You could find somebody who has implemented a technology that your guys are going to be implementing and learn from that person, right? So there's, in the book, I talk about a handful of reasons that it makes sense to belong to a external organization beyond just the classic, you must be looking for work.
Yeah. I think, if people want to find out more about you, where's the best place to go?
Yeah, so you can go to my website at excellius.com. So that's EXCELLIUS.com. And also at the top of the website, there's a Raise Your Visibility and Value link. So you can click on that link and it'll take you to a site that has more information, more videos, very similar to some of the stuff we're talking about today, about being more visible and value in your organizations. So, my website's a great place to go to get more information.
Because I feel that I have a lot of questions, but in 30 minutes or an hour or even a whole day, we cannot contain this topic that you're talking about. It's also a mindset shift.
It is, and a brilliant observation. In the book, I talk about mindset because part of our challenge, and I call it the glass half empty syndrome, is we were talking about this a little bit earlier today, this behavior of people in the marketplace of not getting back to each other, right? So one of the 7 visibility accelerators is to be more responsive,
yes,
which is to get back to others, because if they don't hear from you, they're going to go around you. So, why people don't get back to others, I don't know. As I said earlier, I'm not a sociologist, so, I don't know why people don't do this, but, it's very, very easy to do, to get back to others, to keep you visible. I make it a personal practice. I get back to everyone. And even if it's a quick little, hey, I don't have time today, I'll call you tomorrow. Or, hey, I can't do that right now. Can you call me in a month? They'll get something. And I'll either hear back from them that says, hey, sounds good, thank you. But,
it's hard, yeah.
It is hard. It's very hard. But more often than not, people will thank you. And they'll say, hey, thanks for at least getting back to me. You're the first person who ever got back to me.
Yeah. You the deal.
Exactly. Right. So I think that creates greater visibility in the marketplace when you are accessible, which is another accelerator where people can get to you, and then you're responsive. Right? To me, it's kind of like a revolving door. Mm-hmm. Access is being able to get to you. And if people can get to you, you can't shut the door on them. You got to keep the door open and get back to them. And you got to keep that revolving door turning, because if it ever stops, it might not start again. So you got to keep it going.
That's great. So do you have any last words before we go off today? I think you gave a lot of great insights.
Good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Any last words for the audience?
Well, a couple of marketing words.
Yeah, buy the book.
Buy the book. So you can go to Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com and purchase the book. And then also in the book, but also on my website, I also have a Raise Your Visibility Indicator, which is an online tool that allows you to go in and identify how you're doing in raising your visibility. And so it'll provide you a report that says, hey, here's where you're doing things really well, and here's some areas that might need some help, and here's some ideas, right? So it's also an idea generator on ways to make improvement in those areas. So it only focuses on areas that you need help. And, I'd encourage people to take it, because you can identify ways that you can get, better at it. So on Excelius.com, under Raise Your Visibility and Value, you can click on the report and buy it. Or if you buy the book, you get it free.
All right. So everyone go to Excelius.com. And I just want to say thank you once again.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Popping in today. And
this was great.
With us. Talk to you all later. Bye-bye.